this is about my first babysitting job that I had when I was 13. And it was for an adorable one-year-old named David. And David and I met the old-fashioned way, which was, at that time, through the Walnut. My parents didn't know his family, and, of course, I didn't know him. But my mother had made a call. She had known someone in the neighborhood, and she made a phone call, which was apparently enough of an endorsement for me to be able to walk over there and babysit David by myself. So I remember arriving at the house and being completely surprised by the condition of the home. Now, I grew up in a house with 6 kids, so I know what a mess looks like. But this people was no mess. This was a fucking mess. It was a capital F, capital M. There were dishes in the sink, and there were toys and books and clutter and dirt absolutely everywhere. I remember I needed to go to the bathroom, and while I was in there, I noticed that the bathtub had been repurposed as a clothes hamper. It was filled completely to the top with dirty clothing. So they apparently didn't wash themselves or their clothing, and one whiff of David would tell you that was the case. So on our way out, Diane, the mom, explained to me that the baby's father would be stopping by to check on him. And that piece of information just freaked me out just a little bit. So I called home, and my parents weren't there, but my brother was there with his best friend. So the two of them were going to come over to protect me from what I knew was imminent axe murder. So my brother Rob and his best friend Bobby Kennedy speed over on their bicycles to protect me. So they get into the house, and Robbie immediately starts fortifying the place. He's got bookends and trophies, and I remember he took a couple of butcher knives and stashed them on either side of the front door in these matching picture frames. Now meanwhile, Bobby Kennedy is lurking around the house like a visitor at a freak show. And he calls out to us. He wants us to notice that they have one of those plastic gag gifts that you would buy at Spencer Gifts. Now, please tell me you know what Spencer's is, and you've seen those upside-down ice cream cones. They also have the plastic dog shit version that's appropriate for bringing to school or freaking out your mother. But the only thing is that this ice cream cone was not purchased at Spencer's Gifts. It was the real deal. I know, because when I pressed it, it went... So the doorbell rings. We'd actually heard the Harley Davidson pull up on the front lawn, and just as I imagined, just like a scene out of Easy Rider, or actually for you youngsters, just like a scene out of Sons of Anarchy, there's Bill with his wife beater and his mirrored sunglasses and his slicked back hair and the obligatory Budweiser in his hand, and he's there to check on David. And actually the visit went remarkably well. There were, I guess he just needed to check me out as thoroughly as my mother had checked them out. So he leaves, the boys leave, and I walk down to the corner store to use the restroom. And by this time, my mother had caught wind of this whole episode. She comes over to the house to take me and the baby back to our home. And she leaves a note on the door, I know, which looked like a ransom note at that time, but it really didn't matter because I was safe and I could breathe. And after a few hours, David's mom came to the house to pick him up, and my mother explained that I was no longer able to babysit for her, but at their home. But if they needed a babysitter, I was welcome to go. They were welcome to bring David to my house at any time. And so that's exactly how it happened. Of course, this came with the caveat that David would be bathed and changed into a fresh pair of clothing so that we could play with him. So and that's actually how it happened for what seemed to be a few years. David came to our house every week, 3 or 4 times a week for babysitting. And thanks. I know I have 1 minute. I just made me forget my next piece of the story. Okay, so David came over every week for 3 or 4 days a week, and we would play with him, and it really worked out pretty well. If I wasn't available, my sister would babysit, or my brothers would babysit. Sometimes he would just hang with my mother and father. And eventually his little sister came to join him, and as I recall, she had a really wicked case of diaper rash, and she didn't smell very well either, but I think a bath took care of both of those symptoms. So when I think about this now, I realize that that was really the very best outcome of that situation for all involved. For me, there apparently was no axe murder that evening. Diane, I'm sure she had gone through a full list of babysitting resources, not finding anybody who was willing to show up 2 days in a row to babysit at that house. And my family got a really good gig. I mean, back in 1974, we were pulling in $1 an hour for that babysitting job. 3 or 4 times a week, it was pretty good. And David, he made out pretty well. He got a surrogate family, and he learned a lot of things about life, and about love, and about personal hygiene.